let's get into Star Wars Outlaws. First off, right up top, I want to address this. I think it's fun. I think it's genuinely quite good in a way that doesn't need caveating. It's 4 stars for me in my media database. It puts it on balance with Perfect Days by Wim Wenders, The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, so if that gives you an idea of where it's at. But given my tendency to overrate sci-fi open world games, if you'd like, you could consider it a 3.5 star. Anyway, there's been a lot of hate around this game. As you'd expect, it's a Star Wars game, open world, Ubisoft, and there's a girl in it. So, you know, there's been a lot of hate for all that terrible stuff. Given that I've left it so long to do this, I can sort of do all my criticism in reaction to criticisms that I've seen, which is, I think, a mode many of you would prefer me to work in. Now, I do want to slightly put it in the context of massive entertainment. You know, it's a subdivision of Ubisoft, but they've got their own approach, their own game engine that they built for The Division, and they did the Avatar game from last year. So that is sort of, even though this is being thought of as a Star Wars Ubisoft game, it's closest to the Avatar game, which is, I think, quite different from the design that you see in Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and Watch Dogs, you know. Watch Dogs. I've just amused myself by emphasizing that wrong. But so a bit of a different design, different engine, still arriving at a sort of Ubisoft open world territory, but I just think of it as a slightly different beast. And of course, it has co-production from all those Ubisoft studios. Like every Ubisoft studio in the world had some input on this game. But, well, I just wanted to clear that up. The context of this release, you know, whatever. You know, I thought like that Avatar game was like a passable open world. It looked really great, and I felt like if you were super invested in Avatar, you know, it let you sort of play in that world, but it wasn't fantastic. It didn't feel great mechanically to play. So that game is sort of exactly what I was expecting from this game, a Star Wars reskin of the Avatar game from last year, and I got a lot more than that, I think. Anyway, to quickly go over what the game's like, you know, it's mostly open world Ubisoft stuff. There's 4 planets, 3 of them are like fully open world. You ride your speeder around to all different locations. One of them is just a packed-in city. You can do all different jobs for different people and different factions. There's a framing narrative tying everything together. You can go into space, there's space combat, there's space stations you can land in. It's a massive pile everything together, AAA Star Wars open world game done well. Anyway, I think I'll start properly by talking about the plot. I think it got a lot of heat, even from people who liked the game, for having a bad or just passable plot. And this is where it maybe gets hard to not caveat. I think it's like, if this were a book or a movie and it had this plot exactly, like if you just watch through all the cutscenes of this game, you'd be like, this is a very boring movie. It's just all sort of normal tropes are happening. It's sort of basic, it's paced too slow. Who gives a shit? But I think it's a great game plot, especially for this type of game. You know, it's just a heist. You really just plan to do a heist and you do it. That's the game. So you've got to do like a getting the band together type thing, of course. I think you've got to go find 4 people to add to your heist team and skill up in general. Build a bit of a name for yourself. Do all that, do a heist, bang, done. Like sort of everyone knows what that plot is. And I think that's fantastic. It makes a fantastic excuse for gameplay. It's sort of like a reliable plot that you can jump in and out of. It doesn't clash with doing other things in the game, you know, it just works for what this game is, I think. And I think games have been getting better at this recently. It used to be something that I was annoyed by, where you'd have like, in an open world game, you'd have the gameplay part where you just go and do everything you possibly can on a map. And then you'd have the story part, and it's just like trying to be a movie with an emotional arc. And it's like, why are we spreading that out over 50 hours or whatever, and like it's trying to be a movie, but it's not getting there. So I think this sort of thing is better. It used to be like, here's the gameplay, and here's the part where we really embarrassingly and poorly try to be a movie. Whereas this is more like, here's the gameplay, and here's the framing narrative for the gameplay. I think you've got good characters, interesting character dynamics, and I like that the short-term, you know, betrayals and stuff that goes on, the little twists, those are delivered as twists, while the more like long-term betrayals and character reveals and stuff are sort of just dealt with as inevitable. And I like that, because I have a whole thing about that stuff. But anyway, I think it does a good job of fleshing out the three big leads, Kay, ND5, and Nyx, and making you care about them. And I like that Kay is sort of just a hater right to the end. Which I saw criticism of this as well, that like this game wasn't radical enough or whatever. You know, it wasn't being Andor. Which to me is, of course, whatever. But I think, you know, that's just not what this game is. And it quietly is a bit rebellious and stuff. Like, I think it's interesting. In this game, Kay sees all these injustices happening or whatever, the Empire doing horrible shit, and then she often comments on, like, you know, let's just ignore that and move on. You know, you see someone getting roughed up by a stormtrooper or whatever, and you use that as an excuse to sneak by. But I think that's the story. It's not an accident that Kay isn't caring about this stuff. I think the story shows this stuff happening. And like, she's annoyed by the rebels, and she makes comments like, oh, they're all the same, the rebels and the Empire, you know. Which I think this is why people criticize the game for this, because they're like, oh, Kay is being a centrist. But I think, you know, the game's plot shows that that doesn't make sense here. Kay's dialogue is sort of dramatic irony. And even though she's annoyed by the rebels and she bitches and moans about the rebels, they never like do anything bad to you, really. Kay's annoyed about it, but sort of like, oh, it makes sense why they did that. And you know, you're always on the rebels' side. You can't kill a rebel in this game, I don't think. But you kill like thousands of stormtroopers. So, you know, I think, you know, the thrust of the game is actually pretty straightforward. It's just that the story the game is telling is about a rough around the edges, amoral thief. So anyway, that's plot. That's plot done. I think one of my differences in appraising games is I think there's been like 3 games out of all time that have a plot that actually stands up when you put it next to the plot in any other narrative medium. So, you know, an okay plot that keeps the game moving, that's sort of what I'm looking for. I'm not going to criticize it for not being transcendent. However, I suppose the thing that does annoy me always is fan service. So let's talk about that. It's fairly restrained. I think in terms of like fan service characters that you meet, there's like 4 maybe. It's like Emilia Clarke from the Young Han Solo movie. That character was probably the most interesting part of that movie, and it makes sense that you'd see her here. And it's not really fan service because, well, some people like that movie, but they're wrong. Jabba the Hutt as well. It just makes sense that he's going to show up in this game, and I think it's done pretty tastefully. You know, you do of course like go into Jabba's palace and fight a Rancor, of course, but outside of that, it's like your interactions with Jabba are pretty limited. You have this reputation system with all the different criminal factions in the game, which is sort of immediately it shows you that Jabba's going to be in the game, and that is sort of a great little system that they've got going there. It's not like super impactful or anything, but it's, you know, just a nice little background detail thing to work on. And if you max out your reputation with the Hutt cartel, you can go back into Jabba's palace, but you're still just like a little contractor that Jabba the Hutt is going to ignore, you know. So that's good. Darth Vader shows up at one point, on the plus side, not to interact with you, the player character. On the negative side, he uses epic force powers, and it's a, oh, whoa, this is so awesome sort of moment, which I'm always annoyed by. And Lando shows up. And I think it's fucked up that he doesn't hit on you. It's very noticeable. And those are the big ones. Those are like recognizable characters that you actually interact with in the game. There's some other like actual cameos, as like you see this person walk past once, and like deeper references and stuff for absolute dorks. So it's pretty good, I think, on that front. I was a little irritated by the layout of Tatooine. Like all of the notable landmarks of Tatooine are all in this little, you know, area. I thought it was annoying that Docking Bay 94 was the only docking bay in Mos Eisley, and like Jabba's palace, you can get to it by going through a cave out the back of Mos Eisley. That sort of stuff just felt stupid to me. But apparently that's canon. In Star Wars canon, all of Tatooine is just in a little like 100-kilometer radius, and the rest of the planet is entirely uninhabitable. So anyway, I'm not pleased about that in general, but it's not the game's fault. On the other hand, having said all this stuff, not being too pleased with fan service in general, I did buy some direct energy conduits outside of the Toshi station, and I felt very pleased with myself. Now, I think the other big area that people hate about this game is the stealth and combat stuff. And I think it's genuinely good. There are for sure some janky stealth combat animations. You know, some of the takedowns don't look very lethal. There's slow, clunky transitions between animations or whatever. But I don't give a fuck about that stuff, you know? I guess like 4 years ago now, I played all the Arkham games, replayed them all back to back, and it's interesting to see, you know, the addition of more complex animations with each game, obviously building on the work that they've done in previous games, but that first game is actually really stripped back and basic. It's interesting, you know, it's just like everyone expects the maximum AAA polish out of any game, where the gameplay is like, the gameplay of this game is polished. It's just like, oh, the animations, they don't have enough worked out animations. Yeah, it hasn't been built on over years, you know. And also a note is like the Snowdrop engine here is not the Assassin's Creed engine. But I think what they've done here, they have managed to get on the level of Assassin's Creed stealth. Not like specifically, mechanically with the animations or whatever, but looking at the overall package here, the flow of the gameplay of what they're trying to do, they have got to an enjoyable standard with a flow and a level of polish that works. I think it's just doing a different thing, really, which I will explain. And it's also building on the stealth of that Avatar Frontiers of Pandora game, which if you've played that game, the stealth in that sucked so fucking bad. So this is a massive leap forward from there. I think a big problem with the stealth that people have is it doesn't teach you all of the deeper systems that it has, the ways that you can approach stealth. Like the tutorial level shows you how to do a very sort of bog standard AAA stealth mission. And it looks like it's going to be crouch through all the bushes, you know, that sort of thing. But there's a lot of really actually interesting mechanics and novel stuff happening here that you eventually pick up on through hours of play. For me, right off the bat, I fucked up that first stealth mission, so I immediately got a taste of other things that the game let you do. But I think that's sort of all games now, in the AAA space or whatever. There's just so many fucking mechanics piled on. It's sort of too deep to explain in the like 10-minute tutorial level at the top. A lot of what makes the stealth cool and unique is Nyx, your little rodent companion. He can do distractions for you, he can do attacks, he can hack things, you can use him to draw an enemy away and then just shoot them, and that works as stealth, you know. And there's like environmental takedowns. And I really like, you get like a last resort stun mode on your blaster. It's sort of like a single use thing. Then it has a long recharge, but you can just use that whenever in stealth if you need to get out of something quickly. And it's totally valid to run past stuff. You don't have to like kill every enemy or whatever. And if all else fails, you just get into a really big scrappy shootout. And most stealth areas in this game, even like the ones I've seen specifically being complained about at the start of the game, are not instant fail, regular AAA stealth stuff. They have all of these systems in them, and your goal is to not raise the alarm. So there's like alarms in every area, and some enemies I think just have like a comm link or whatever. So you can just use Nix to trap the alarms ahead of time, or just shoot the enemies before they get to the alarms, you know. So you can deal with these levels in a lot of ways. There's a lot of freedom of play. I think you're kind of meant to fail, though. Really, the game sets you up for it, more than most stealth games. There's like, most of the enemies are in little groups that are too hard to stealth. So you blow it, then you get into a big shootout where you deal relatively low damage. And people are mad about this, right? People are mad about the stealth, they're mad about the combat. I've seen reviews saying, the combat doesn't feel good enough, and why can't I just hold on to the powerful weapons that I can pick up from enemies' corpses? You know, why can't I just use those weapons all the time? But I think the way it works is sort of every area you approach as though you want to stealth it, and doing as much as you can in stealth is good. The fail state for stealth is just the shootout, and it can be a relatively punishing shootout. And then it feels like a sort of whoopsie Han Solo moment, you know? You get into this really scrappy shootout, you squeeze off a couple of shots, then you run for cover as much as you can. You're still trying to use the environment, you know, blow up explosives, get your dog to do things for you. You're picking up enemy weapons and using them. And I think if you vibe with it, if you just like lean into what the game is trying to get you to do, it feels good. I recorded this gameplay video like on the first side mission I got, and I think I did that really before I picked up on how the whole stealth worked, which is probably a good point to sidetrack into talking about the open world stuff. I think it takes like 1 or 2 hours to open up enough that you can actually do the open world stuff, you know, the opening planet tutorial stuff. You just got to get through that, and then it probably takes a couple more hours to really open up to where you can do any job, and you know, as you progress in the game, you'll open more planets to go to and stuff. Again, that's basically all games in the AAA space. I don't really see that as an issue. There's a progression, there's a lot of stuff in this game. You've got to play some of the game to unlock the stuff to play. But of course, people have all complicated complaints about this sort of thing. I think especially because it's a Ubisoft game, and people burn out on Ubisoft games and open world games because they play too much of them. I think, you know, I quite enjoy one of these games or whatever, like once a year maybe, and I complete the main plot and maybe like 20% of everything else, and I feel good about that. The appeal is not 100% completion. You don't have to check off every single thing on the map, you know. The appeal is that wherever you go in the game, there is a little bit of stuff to do if you feel like it. They're actually on that in this game. I think they've made the very smart decision to have the maps of the planet start blank, and you can like get quests to add map icons onto those maps, and then once you collect the thing or whatever, it just disappears off the map. So, you know, you don't open up the map and it feels like a checklist of meaningless crap. Even though there is like a checklist of meaningless crap, you just never see it. So I think that should help people. Anyway, so I'm probably done with the game now, though it is very easy to like boot up and dick around in for a little bit. But I think I played 30 hours, and probably half of that, a little under, was the main plot. So, you know, I've done the main plot and a good bit of dicking around. So I think I'll probably cancel my Ubisoft Plus tonight, which I suppose I'll do a side note on this. I got it through Ubisoft Plus, so I paid whatever, $25 New Zealand or whatever for 1 month to get the deluxe edition of this game, and that's it. I'm gonna stop paying for Ubisoft Plus, and that's it. Which I don't really understand as a business model. You know, like they make all their money from selling these AAA games at full price and then selling all these little DLCs at a ridiculous price. And I just got all of it for a low price, and I'm not staying subscribed. I don't really get why they've done that. Anyway, so I might wait till all the DLCs have come out or whatever, and then pick it back up and play another 30 hours from the top then. But you know, that's sort of how I approach these sorts of games. Obviously there are people who just like want to play one game non-stop forever. And this is probably slightly too small to cater to that, which is ideal because it means it's fun. But let's talk about the side shit there is to do. You know, you've got different levels of side quests, including like endless procedural ones that work into the reputation system, which isn't, you know, that's not a bad way of dealing with that. And then you've got a good little range of mini games. And I think the great thing about them is they're sort of motivated by the game's plot. It makes sense why you would play these things, or most of them, and it's really sort of fitting. You've got your card game, of course, which is Sabacc, and that's pretty good. And I think a couple highlights are like Nyx finds little treasures, and then you have to like platform and puzzle around to go after them to collect them, which is a nice little character thing. And on each of the 4 planets you can get food with Nyx, which is just sort of like a quick time event thing. But that's fantastic, and I think that also offers like some quite big impactful gameplay changes, the different foods for Nyx. Anyway, and then you've got like arcade machines, which like I dicked around with a couple of them, but that does seem like a more of an absurd sidetrack. And you've got like horse racing, which also has a little thing with like sometimes the races are fixed, so you can bet on, you know, a guaranteed win or whatever. But you know, it's just it's a very expansive game filled with a ton of crap to do if you want. You don't have to do any of this stuff. And I think, you know, being AAA, it is just sort of impressive how many different features and mechanics and little mini games and stuff they have managed to pile into here. The interesting thing is they have like sometimes, you know, you squeeze through a gap in some rocks or whatever, like games do when they need to load in something, right? But they sometimes seem to be in areas where it doesn't need to stream in any assets. Like they just saw other games doing the squeezing through rocks thing, and they were like, oh, we should do that. I don't know. Anyway, I remember seeing Nyx in the promotional material and being like, oh, whatever. You know, actually I was amusing myself being really angry about Nyx. People were, even at that stage, people were sharing pictures of KVS and being like, oh, look at this disgusting piece of shit. So I was enjoying applying that rhetoric to Nyx. But I feel like, you know, it is sort of a trope now in AAA games that you have like a little pet. You know, there's the can you pet the dog type stuff. And I expected a BD1, you know? You know, in the Star Wars games now you have some fucking useless dog. But I say all this because Nyx genuinely won me over. I really grew to like Nyx. I think the big thing is through just the massive scope of interactions that they came up with. You know, she's always got little bits of dialogue with Nyx. Nyx will often run up ahead to look at something. He's got so many abilities that you can use. You know, he's just so genuinely useful in gameplay and lets you do a lot of things that, you know, a lot of the gameplay mechanics that are unique to this game are Nyx doing something for you. Which is very cool, and I think the plot really sort of brings into focus how useful he is to you and how much Kay cares about Nyx and stuff. So as it turns out, I liked Nyx in the end. Now I want to talk about the graphics, and then I'll talk about the music, and then I'll wrap up. Why have I introduced structure and how? I have massive amounts of respect for it boots up in 21:9 by default. There's like massive anamorphic barrel distortion and blurring to the lens, some slight vignetting with all this like chromatic aberration and film grain. They've really tried to recreate the look of like 1977 optics. So that is freak shit and mad respect to them for doing it. Now, this game, I think, always on all settings uses some form of ray tracing, and I've complained about ray tracing in games before, and I think you do see the limits of it here, or the limits of it, you know, where the tech is at right now here. You also see the best of it here. I think the best use of ray tracing I've ever seen in a game is in this game. So, you know, it's doing ray tracing for everything and real-time ray tracing tech is not quite good enough yet. You do have those problems of flat glossy reflections, really sort of blobby and noisy ray tracing look. There's a little bit of time for like the diffuse ray tracing to, you know, it sort of builds up over a few frames, so as you enter a new area or whatever, you can sometimes see it sort of fade on. Those are the quirks of where the tech's at right now. And you know, I think things like the water or the glass in this game looks bad. However, they've set up a lot of fantastic locations and situations for you to see the really lovely diffuse bounce of different lights, you know. Little sort of underground cities that are lit by neon and you can see all the lights bouncing around and shit. That's incredible. Also, like hard surface models, like the Star Wars spaceships, they look really great. You see all those bounces of light, they look like models from movies from the 70s, that's fantastic. And even, like, I think with the reflective stuff, you have these like plasticky, way too clean, blobby reflections, which to me look bad most of the time, but like, on stormtroopers' helmets, that looks incredible. So I think, you know, this game really sort of shows the best of what ray tracing tech right now can do. And I think the stuff that I don't like will be resolved eventually by new denoisers, more processing power and stuff. So anyway, it occasionally switches to pre-rendered cutscenes, which look gorgeous, but it's often hard to tell where that switch is. The visual sort of, the parity is really close. The big problems, I think, is unflattering lighting in cutscenes, which is, I just think, the reality of just letting the ray tracing do whatever. You know, like, I think Baldur's Gate 3 and like BioWare games since forever, once you get into a dialogue scene, they just pop a light here, you know? So that there's just always, so your character's just always somehow nicely lit. But you know, this game, especially like in the rain at night on the jungle planet, you can get into a cutscene and be like, wow, this looks terrible. So I think that's just like a lack of deliberate lighting design for those things. I think the cutscenes really just aren't a focus. The other problem with them is terrible animations. Like really loose lip sync, sort of, I don't know, like loose facial animations. It looks like they're animated in like half time. They're sort of just like the faces are morphing around, not really expressing properly or anything. But it just feels like it's not the focus. And it only sticks out, I think, because of the visual quality of everything else. You know, it's sort of the same as a lot of games. You know, the cutscenes just give you the impression of the dialogue scene. You know, it's not actually trying to be a whole animated movie. But I think that stuff is, you know, a bit to blame for people thinking that KVS is busted. You can watch my gameplay video for my very complex thoughts on that. Because she's not ugly. I don't, like, she's just got a wolf cut, you know, it's, she's just like a quirked up art hoe. I mean that in the style sense, not I don't mean to, I'm not trying to insult. I wouldn't call a woman a hoe devoid of context. It's just the phrase art hoe. I want to make sure to shut down the terrible misogyny, you know, the male gaze stuff. It's not on. I think she's very fuckable. Now the music here is by Wilbert Roget. I think it's fantastic music, and I've really loved his work in the past. Actually, recently he's done Helldivers 2 and Pacific Drive from this year, which have fantastic soundtracks. But I really loved his stuff on Star Wars The Old Republic. I think probably my favorite original pieces for that game are his. Especially some of those open worlds are hugely punched up by his beautiful ambient pieces for them. Hoth and Tatooine in that game are massive open spaces. They're very sparse. They're not particularly interesting maybe, but you know, when you have his score going along with it, it just feels it's wonderful. And also I think he did like some of the Republic themes, some of the Taris themes, some of the Tython and Jedi themes. So I think genuinely a lot of my favorite pieces from that game are his, and I maybe have an idea of what they sound like. And because of that, at a certain point, it clicked for me, oh, this soundtrack must be Wilbert Roget's soundtrack. And so I googled it, and it was. So I said, one of the Star Wars Outlaws Tatooine ambient music cues sounds so much like a Star Wars The Old Republic Hoth ambient music cue, I immediately picked the composer as Wilbert Roget, and he saw that and replied, which is another addition to my collection of times I made trouble for musicians online. So then I replied, you've been killing it lately, and this game in particular has a really incredible fusion of styles and whatever. And I wasn't saying that to blow smoke or a cover. I genuinely believe that and had been thinking it beforehand. Now, Star Wars game music for the longest time has just been like John Williams attempts, right? And then maybe you stretch the logic of that to do combat themes and ambient themes or whatever. Now this included, this does go for John Williams type themes, but I think this is so much more. And like Star Wars projects recently have been branching out more, but this feels like the furthest step out. And at the same time, it does know when to do and can do a really good John Williams like. It sometimes veers into trap, into straight up electronic, and there's a lot of like cool little instruments and stuff going on. I think like it's got percussion elements like coins being tossed and guns cocking and stuff, with acoustic guitars and electric violins and synths and sitars and shit. So it's sort of chaotic, but I think it all comes together and creates sort of its own style that feels really fitting for what the game is, for Kay Vess as a character. You've got like the Trailblazer theme, which could be like, you know, one of those map room pieces from Mass Effect. You've got the opening theme, which has all these like crazy percussive elements, trap beat, going into Kay's theme, and then building into a sort of John Williams string thing, whatever. And then you've got everything in between, building up to like the final use of Kay's theme, which is like a huge John Williams score, you know. So yeah, now let's put it all together and recap here. So there you go, that's Star Wars Outlaws. I think it's not hated now, and I think certainly amongst actual critics, you know, they were normal about it, but a lot of people haven't been normal about it, and I think it's just sort of a genuinely good open world game. It has its highs and lows, but I think there's things about the plot that are unique and fantastic, things about the graphics, things about the gameplay that are unique and fantastic, and it all comes together to be a really nice sort of cohesive Star Wars scoundrel open world game, which is I think a thing that a lot of people have been looking for, and I think they've done a good job of it.